Twice, they went to Aaliyah Boston in the post, twice in the final 25 seconds of a 2-point road game. Twice they drew it up. Twice they called her number. Twice they left Caitlin Clark standing wide open at the 3-point line like she was a spectator they had accidentally given a jersey to. And twice Aaliyah Boston missed. And the Indiana Fever lost 90-88 and flew home from San Francisco with absolutely nothing to show for a game they had every single right to win. Welcome to Street Hoops. I'm Dre Fever. And if you thought the previous episode was heated, strap yourself in because tonight we are going all the way down to the molecular level on this Indiana Fever performance. This coaching staff, this roster, and this organizational philosophy. Because what happened at Chase Center on Thursday night was not just a bad loss. It was a complete and systematic failure at every level of this basketball operation. And every person who cashed a check from the Indiana Fever this week owes Caitlin Clark, the fans, and this city a very serious explanation. Let me start with the money. Because in this league, in this era, the money is the context. Without the financial backdrop, the performance questions are just complaints. With it, they become accountability. This off-season, the Indiana Fever made history on 2 separate occasions within days of each other. And both moves were supposed to signal to the world that this organization was serious about building a championship contender around Caitlin Clark. First came Kelsey Mitchell. 1 year, $1.4 million. The first player in WNBA history to sign the new Supermax deal under the landmark collective bargaining agreement. That contract was not a gift. It was a reward. Mitchell averaged over 20 points per game in 2025, was named All-WNBA First Team, and carried an injury-ravaged roster to the WNBA semifinals while averaging 22 points across 8 postseason games with Clark barely available. She earned every penny of that money in 2025. The question tonight is whether she is earning it in 2026. Then came Aaliyah Boston. 4 years, $6.3 million, the richest total contract in the history of this league, made possible by the new epic provision in the CBA that fast-tracks max deals for exceptional performers on rookie contracts. According to reports from ESPN, Wilson actually took less money in year 1, $1 million this season instead of the $1.19 million she was eligible for, specifically to give the Fever more flexibility to build out the supporting roster around her and Clark. Read that again. She left money on the table for her team. She made a financial sacrifice in the name of winning. And when a player makes a sacrifice like that, when she puts team construction ahead of personal earnings, she creates an obligation, not just a contractual one but a moral one, to show up and be worth every dollar when the game is on the line. A'ja Wilson on Thursday night at Chase Center, 4 for 11 from the field, 13 points and 2 missed shots in the final 25 seconds of a 2-point game that the Fever could not afford to lose. That is the ledger. That is what the most expensive contract in WNBA history produced in the most important moment of this young season. And I need you to feel the full weight of that before we go any further. Now, and I want to be fair and precise here because this matters. The Wilson situation is not entirely or even mostly about A'ja Wilson the basketball player. I'm going to say that directly so nobody clips 10 seconds of this and takes it out of context. A'ja Wilson has been one of the best centers in this league for 3 consecutive years. She averages over 14 points and 8 rebounds on better than 54% shooting for her career. She is a legitimate all-star. She is a legitimate building block. When she is being used correctly, when the offense is putting her in positions where her skills translate directly to production, she is a difference maker on a championship caliber team. But here is the problem. This offense is not putting her in those positions. And that is a coaching failure being worn by a player who deserves better. Let me explain exactly what I mean. The 2 things that Aaliyah Boston does at an elite professional level, the 2 things that no reasonable defender can fully take away from her on any given night, are catching and finishing in the low post with her back to the basket, and operating as the rolling big on a properly executed pick and roll with a creative guard. This team has both ingredients. It has a legitimate low post threat at center, and the greatest pick and roll initiator in this sport at the point guard position. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston running pick and roll basketball should be the foundation of this offense. The most difficult action in the game for a defense to stop is a talented guard threatening the three-pointer. While a mobile, skilled big threatens the roll to the basket, the defense has to make an impossible choice on every single possession. You either hedge and give Clark a clean look from deep, or you help off Boston and let her receive the lob or the dump off at the rim. Every great offensive team in professional basketball, in the men's game, in the women's game, at every level, is built on some variation of that principle. So, why in a one-possession road game with the season's narrative on the line, Is Aaliyah Boston drifting to the three-point line on 90% of her possessions? Why is the pick and roll between these two players something that happens 3 or 4 times a game instead of being the central pillar that the entire offensive architecture is built around? Why, when they finally do run it and Boston rolls open to the elbow for a clean, uncontested mid-range jumper, a shot that is absolutely within her skill set, a shot she has made hundreds of times, does she look so surprised that the action worked that she passes it up instead of shooting? Because they never run it. Because she has been conditioned by this offensive system to expect the play to go somewhere else. And that is not Aaliyah Boston failing. That is a coaching staff failing Aaliyah Boston. And Stephanie White publicly said, the day before this game in front of reporters, that Caitlin Clark is the Fever's first offensive option. She said it clearly and without hesitation. Our first offensive option is usually Caitlin Clark, but it's in different ways. Different ways? What does that mean? I'll tell you what it looked like Thursday night. It looked like Clark off the ball standing in the corner watching Kelsey Mitchell pound dribble at the top of the key. It looked like Clark trying to navigate a blitz off a ball screen with no secondary action behind it to punish the double team. It looked like Clark working extraordinarily hard for every single touch while Veronica Burton, the player killing Indiana on the other end, was getting to go one-on-one against whoever she wanted with no defensive aggression meeting her. When you say Clark is your first option, but your offensive system does not reflect that reality, the disconnect between words and actions is not a communication problem. It is a structural problem, and structural problems do not fix themselves. Now, let's talk about Kelsey Mitchell because I am not going to let her off the hook tonight. $1.4 million. Supermax. The highest annual salary the Indiana Fever have ever paid a player in this franchise's history. 5 for 13. 5 personal fouls. And multiple sequences in this game that were, I will just say it plainly, embarrassing for a player of her caliber and experience. There were 2 separate moments in this game where Kelsey isolated at the top of the key, put her head down, and drove directly into a crowded lane with no plan. Both times she got the shot blocked. Both times Golden State pushed it the other way and got easy points. And both times she came right back down on the next possession and made another poor decision as if the previous mistake had never happened. That is not aggression. That is recklessness. And recklessness in a 2-point road game against a team that is faster and more organized than you on this particular night is a direct contributor to the loss. The foul situation with Kelsey was equally maddening. She fouled off the ball with the shot clock winding down. She fouled jump shooters. Jump shooters giving Golden State free throws in moments when Indiana needed stops. And the most infuriating part is that after all of this, after the blocked shots and the bad decisions and the foul trouble and the defensive breakdowns, Stephanie White kept running her out there. No accountability, no hard seat, no message, just Kelsey back on the floor possession after possession executing the same mistakes and getting the same results. At some point, the head coach has to look at the evidence in front of her and make a decision. The decision is not to bench Kelsey Mitchell forever. The decision is to create a consequence so that the next possession matters, and that decision was never made. And Dree needs to say something that some people are not going to want to hear. Last season, Kelsey Mitchell was great. Genuinely great. All WNBA first team great. But last season Caitlin Clark was only on the floor for 13 games. Kelsey was the primary option. Every play, every late game possession, every clutch moment ran through her. She thrived because the offense needed her to be the star and she rose to that challenge. This year Clark is healthy and averaging career numbers. The role has shifted. Kelsey is no longer the first option. She is a supremely talented second option on what should be a genuinely elite offensive team. Making that transition from primary star to high-level co-star is one of the hardest adjustments in professional sports. Some players make it beautifully, others fight it, and right now there are nights where it looks like Kelsey is still playing like she is the number 1 option on this team even when the situation clearly calls for her to be number 2 or 3. Getting that alignment right is partially on Kelsey. But the larger part of getting it right is on the coaching staff to design an offense that makes the role distinctions clear and runs the right plays for the right players in the right moments. That is coaching. That is the job. Now, let me talk about Veronica Burton for a minute because in a night when I am being very hard on the Fever, credit has to go where it belongs. 25 points, 6 rebounds, a career-best 5 blocked shots from a guard. Burton was the best player on the floor Thursday night and she was not particularly close. She attacked the basket relentlessly. She knocked down shots from the mid-range. She patrolled the paint on defense and swallowed up drives that should have resulted in easy points. And the thing that makes Burton's performance most damning for Indiana is not the individual statistics. It is what they reveal about the Fever's defensive scheme or lack thereof. The one time in this game that Indiana actually blitzed Burton on a ball screen catch, the one time they sent a second defender at her immediately and forced her to make a quick decision, she looked completely lost. She did not know what to do. The ball moved out of her hands awkwardly and the possession went nowhere. One time. The Fever ran that action one time and then never again. Not once in the remaining minutes of a game where Burton finished with 25 points, did Indiana go back to the one defensive wrinkle that demonstrably disrupted her rhythm. That is not a personnel problem. That is not a talent problem. That is a coaching problem. You found the answer and you put it in a drawer. Gabby Williams was equally problematic for Indiana's defense. 19 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. And for long stretches, the Fever's rotations on the perimeter were slow, disconnected, and reactive rather than proactive. Golden State was getting clean catch-and-shoot looks off ball movement that Indiana's defense was not organized enough to close out on. And here is the structural issue underneath all of it. If you are putting your defense in a compromised position by running a poor offense, if your offensive possessions are long, disorganized, and turn the ball over at critical moments, your defense is going to be playing scramble basketball because it never has time to get set. Indiana had 14 turnovers in this game. 14. Some of those came from Clark in the final 2 minutes under extreme defensive pressure. But many of them came earlier in the game from the fundamental disorganization of an offense that does not seem to know from possession to possession what the hierarchy of options actually is. Let me say something specifically about the Clark second-half aggression issue because this comes up in a lot of the game analysis, and I want to address it precisely. Clark finished with 16 points and 6 assists. She went 3 for 12 from the field, and her second half was less aggressive than her first, which was 11 points on a similar shooting pace. After she hit a three-pointer with about 4 minutes left to cut the Golden State lead to 1, an absolutely huge shot in the context of the game, Stephanie White proceeded to not run a single designed action for Clark for approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes in a one-possession road game in the fourth quarter against a physical, organized defense that was trapping every screen and blitzing every action Clark was trying to run. Clark sat in the corner and watched 4 minutes of offense happen around her. And then when she finally did get the ball back late, it was in isolation against a fresh defense that had 4 full minutes to reset and prepare. The turnovers in the final 90 seconds, and yes, they hurt, and yes, they need to be better, happened in the context of Clark being asked to create out of nothing against a team that knew exactly what was coming because nothing else on the floor was threatening enough to make them worry about anything else. If your star player disappears from the offense for 4 minutes in a critical fourth quarter stretch, and you are the head coach, that is on you. Run the play, design the action, get the ball where it belongs. Saying Clark is your first option in a Wednesday press conference, and then not running a single play for her in the most critical 4 minutes of the game, is a contradiction that costs you games. Now, I want to address the only 2 people on this roster who actually deserve unambiguous praise tonight. Raven Johnson, 16 points, 7 for 10 from the field, 2 for 3 from 3, defensive presence, competitive energy, the whole package. This was the best game of her young professional career, and she delivered it on a hostile road floor where several veterans were delivering the worst performances of their season. She is a 2-time NCAA champion and the SEC Defensive Player of the Year for a reason. She plays with poise, intelligence, and a chip on her shoulder that this team needs more from more people. And Michaela Timpson, the second-year forward who came into this game and gave Indiana exactly the kind of physical, energetic presence off the bench that the starting lineup was desperately missing. Timpson chipped in at key moments, did not make mistakes, and looked like a player growing into a real professional role. In a night full of veterans who underperformed their contracts, the 2 players making close to the minimum wage showed up the most. Let that sit with you. Let me bring this all the way back around to Stephanie White because I have been dancing around the full conclusion, and it is time to land on it directly. The criticism of Stephanie White is not new. Multiple times this season fans and media have questioned her rotations, her play calling, and the general organizational logic of an offense that seems to fight itself. Earlier this season, when she sat Clark for an extended second-quarter stretch against Washington that contributed to an overtime loss, the reaction from the WNBA world was immediate and fierce. Commentators called it absolute coaching malpractice. Fans questioned whether White knows how to maximize the most valuable basketball asset in women's professional sports. White came back the next press conference and said all the right things. She named Clark as the first option. She talked about different ways. And then Thursday happened. The thing I want to be clear about is this. I'm not calling for Stephanie White's head. I'm not saying she is a bad person or a bad basketball coach in general terms. What I am saying, based purely on the evidence of what I watched Thursday night at Chase Center, is that this team is currently being coached in a way that does not maximize its most important asset, does not protect its best player in late-game situations, does not make in-game adjustments when those adjustments are sitting right there on the court in plain sight, and does not impose consequences on veterans who are underperforming their massive contracts. All four of those things are coaching problems. All four of them are fixable, but they are only fixable if the person responsible for fixing them acknowledges that they exist and makes a genuine visible commitment to changing them. The Fever have something extraordinary on their roster. Caitlin Clark became the fastest player in WNBA history to 500 career assists in this very game. 59 games obliterating Sue Bird's previous record of 82 while going 3 for 12 in a hostile arena where the crowd booed her every single touch. She did that. She made history under those conditions. And then she stood at the three-point line with 0 seconds left and watched the ball die on the floor because the coaching staff gave it to someone else. That image, Clark standing open at the arc while the game ends the wrong way, is the entire story of where this team is right now. The talent is generational. The system is not serving it. And until those two things are aligned, games like Thursday night will keep happening. 2 points. That is the margin. 2 points separated a statement road win and a dispiriting loss. 2 points is the distance between this Indiana Fever team being a genuine contender and being a team that makes you pull your hair out game after game because the ceiling is so obvious and the floor is so frustrating. 2 points is fixable, but only if the people responsible for fixing it have the humility and the urgency to do it now before this season slips any further away from them. Do better, Indiana. Your star deserves it. Your fans deserve it. And frankly, the history of this game deserves it. That is street hoops. Nothing softened, nothing skipped, nothing protected because someone might not like hearing it. If this episode gave you what you came for tonight, destroy that like button right now because that is the single best thing you can do to help this channel keep delivering this level of work to you. I want your full unfiltered takes in the comments below. Does Stephanie White still have your trust? Is Aaliyah Boston worth the extension long-term? And what is the one coaching change that saves this season? Drop everything you have got down there because I am reading every word. If Street Hoops is new to you and you are exhausted by sports coverage that refuses to say the uncomfortable thing out loud, hit subscribe right now because every time the Indiana Fever give us a reason to talk, we are going to be here on time with the full truth and zero apologies. I'm Dre Fever, see you next time. Stay locked in.